We do feed you, you know. You get food. My lazy ass needs to go for a walk because I just need the exercise. But one of the things that I find really helps with my walks is I got myself a wedge vest. It's 10 kgs and it's just really helpful to make my walk like actual exercise. Of course, wearing an extra 10 or so kgs on my body looks a bit strange and I don't want to get looks. So I get this PS5 launch team jacket and it's nice, big and puffy, and it'll hide the weighted vest. And this is what I always do so I don't get strange looks. Also, I'm hoping you're getting better audio this time. I'm currently doing, which is working on my develop talk, pardon me out of breath, the weighted vest is a thing. It's about the VR market, the state of the VR market, perceptions, and why I chose to start a studio now. Because the talk is in the middle of summer, I'm really hoping that stuff comes out at GDC and I can talk more. The VR market is growing and healthy and it's all good. People's expectations of the VR market are wrong, and their belief system around it is really broken. That's the best way I can phrase it, their belief system. In a world where you have things like Behemoth, you have things like Gorilla Tag, VR Chat, and I Am Cat, you kind of got to go, what is the VR market? What does it look like? Is it even one market? Reality is the bulk of the audience is young. While they're up for like a Behemoth, their disposable income's just not there. You need to be looking at smaller price points. You need to be looking at like potentially microtransactions or ads, something that's a bit better, a lower price point, and then sort of level packs other 90s style PC gaming, things like puzzling places and how they monetize, or walkabout mini golf. Good models, scalable models. Sorry, I normally actually just power through this because this is actually my exercise. I've been speed walking from home. I don't want to be huffing and puffing into a microphone, but I also do want to show you the pretty things. It's a stunning space, the cemetery. It's a long talk, really. And as I say, I want to talk about the perspective of being inside the PSVR 1 and 2 bubble, seeing those internal metrics, then seeing the public perception being completely off. And then, working with hardware developers and just realizing like people's viewpoint of the market is just, it's off. The aging problem. Most VR devs are like myself, they're old. In fact, VR devs skew older than most game devs, generally speaking. We're starting to see the new crop come up. But the VR audience isn't that. The VR audience by numbers are, what the VR community calls squeakers. They're teens, young teens, a lot of them, some older. They want multiplayer social stuff. They want stuff that fits into their budget. They'll happily play a Half-Life Alyx or a Behemoth, but they don't have the disposable income necessarily to buy a full-price game. They don't mind pirating. Piracy is rife on the Quest. And I think here's the biggest point. A lot of people always projected that the VR market would at some point hockey stick. And I think in the first few years, maybe first 4 years, I thought that. But very quickly started to realize it wasn't the case. But even then, like when PlayStation VR 1 and CV1, the Vive were launching, I was working at Sony at the time, and I remember speaking to a friend of mine who went on to be a technical director at InDreams, making a bet with him in the developer audience about numbers of headsets sold. And it was a bullish bet. He was like, no, we hit the number. Was it as high as some VR copium and, the whole hype cycle thought? No, but it was a lot higher than all the pessimists thought. And it was where the realistic hardware projections were. It was interesting. But the thing that we didn't see is we didn't see that growth compound in the way we have in other markets. And I think there's a strong reason for that. You can go back to the switch from 2D to 3D gaming to see it. So if you are my age or older, you remember that all games were like 2D. And then around the mid-90s, we started seeing 3D games. And if you were an established 2D gamer, you probably still, and you're sort of an elder millennial or older, and you were an established gamer when you were young, when 2D games were a thing, your personal preference, your nostalgia, the games you pick up will slant and skew towards 2D games, because that is what you have fond memories of. That's like what you're really good at. And yeah, maybe the game has some 3D graphics or uses a 3D engine, but it's fundamentally 2D gameplay. Like, that is the native, that is the norm. And there'll be a few people who slant off that, but I think the distribution curve is strongly that. But we saw an explosion of 3D gaming. Why did we see the explosion? Well, the truth was, when 2D was dominant, the games industry was very small. And most new people came into the games industry much later. You know, if you're an elder millennial, or if you're even a younger millennial, chances are you didn't necessarily, by odds, game when you were very young, or at least not described as a gamer. But you've probably spent more money on gaming in the last decade, just because of disposable income, because of how, you know, much of culture is in video games now. So the market grew. Oh God, look at all this mud. This is one of the downsides, one of the reasons why I wear these specific shoes. Can we get through this? Yeah, we can get through this. This makes for a hilarious roll if I fall, but I don't. Pancake gaming is dominant, the market is mature, and if you're over 20 and VR is coming in, or even if you're over, I'd say, 15 when the VR stuff's coming in, because bear in mind VR came into the market like a decade ago, and most people weren't exposed to it, to be fair. I think your preferences have been set, and you are a pancake gamer. Do I think this means you won't be gaming in VR in, say, 20, 30 years? No. I think as prices drop, and I think as the devices become easier and more economic, sure, you will. But you always have a preference for pancake. And I think that's the reality. And because we don't have this, like, untapped market to grow into, VR is going to grow roughly at the sort of age adoption curve rate, and that inherently constrains its growth. Now, I think there's some turning points. I think one of the big turning points is as the dominant VR market, I say dominant, there's still 1 in 4 US teens plays VR, but you know, pancake is still dominant. But that group is starting to go to uni this year. That group in September will start to head into what we call the cool demo, because marketers and everyone knows that no one wants to do what kids and teenagers are doing, right? It's cringe, it's gross, there's all kinds of stuff around that, right? So you can't like market to a 20 or 30-year-old person based on what kids are doing. It doesn't work psychologically. However, university age, 18, 21, even 25, that Goldilocks demographic of cool, of hip, of youth, of aspiration. Oh, we market that all the time. We market that to bloody 40-year-olds. And they're gonna start hitting that demo. If you look at most of the VR content creators and social media influencers, they're old. You know, we don't see, you know, the younger generation represented very well in VR industry, even though they're the primary market. And I think that is at the heart of the problems in the VR space. And, you know, I think that problem is going to resolve itself. It's going to be painful, but it's going to resolve itself. And I think a big problem with this is that, like, a lot of people who work as devs in the VR space, or have worked as devs in the VR space, entered it because it's the cool new tech, or because there's money to be made, or there's opportunity, or we want to be on the hottest new thing, or if you're like in PlayStation, there's prestige for working on the new thing, you know? Like, there was a lot of reasons professionally to be involved in VR that had nothing to do with being into VR. And I saw it for the last decade or so. I saw all these people flood in who fundamentally aren't interested in the medium. You know, like, they say they're interested, but they're interested in the idea of the medium. It's an abstract, it's a concept for them. So they'll constantly go, oh, VR will get good when we cross this arbitrary technical threshold, or when we do this thing. They're like post-rationalizing themselves constantly about, like, why don't I game more in VR? Why am I not more into VR? Well, because you're not. It's like trying to be into a music genre you're not into. You know, you'll make up excuses and you'll be like, well, maybe blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. All these rationalizations you have, like, we didn't have those rationalizations on the Commodore 64 or the Micro. We didn't say, oh, this is not good enough to make games on. We saw the potential to make games. We made games that fit on the platform, and we had a blast doing it. And, you know, because the industry wasn't an established thing, there wasn't a bunch of old-timers. I mean, if you look at the history of computers and, like, when the personal computer came around and stuff, there was a history of old-timers, and there was people like, oh, because, you know, they're invested in databases and central computing and stuff. So I think, you know, if you're into VR, yeah, get into VR. If you're not into VR, get out of VR. If you're a business who wants to make money on VR, hire people who are into VR. Look for younger people. Look for people who identify with the market. You know, look, are people actually playing the stuff? Are they, you know, and, you know, this always comes to the, like, do you need to be a gamer to be a game dev? And largely I'd say no. And I think if you're hiring a graphics programmer or something, that still stands. But your decision makers, your taste makers, your people working on the titles, they do fundamentally need to know who they're building for and have a connection to it. Because, like, film established all the cinematic conventions, right? Games established all the gaming conventions. VR gaming conventions are still actively developing, and if you're not playing, you know, Into the Radius and Contractors, and you're not playing Gorilla Tag and all this stuff, you come along and you build systems and you don't realize what those systems, what the expectation from the audience is. And also fundamentally, like, a lot of those systems are cracked, but they're cracked for the reasons where the dev wasn't very good at programming, or, you know, they came up with the system really late in development. And then people copy the flaws because they maybe play them for 5-10 hours and they don't spend any real time with them. They don't know about the actual frustrations. So, yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. And then there are people like myself who are into VR, but we're older, right? And for a long time, and I still think this is the case, a lot of us sort of fooled ourselves into thinking we could make games for ourselves. And we can, but we can't expect them to make money, right? Because there's just not enough of us in the market. And I think that's a reality. I see a lot of cool, passionate devs who desperately want to make the cool VR game, but when they do their business charts and when they do their numbers, they're basing it on a market that isn't there. And so that's a problem. That's a real problem. So yeah, and I think this is not helped by the artificial injection of funds in by Meta and stuff, where they gave established devs money to make stuff, because it pulled a lot of people into the industry who probably shouldn't have been in the industry. And I think the great story set, look, it's been brutal. This is where the store opened up to everyone. For established devs, we lost an advantage that was critical to our business. And for players, it does mean a lot of slopples and got sort of surfaced. And I think, we went from one extreme to another extreme. And I think there's probably a happy medium. There's some curation that needs to happen there. But I think access to the store should remain open. And yeah, we'll see hopefully more established, we'll see more new devs who are relegated to side quests and things like that come through and make a hit and make good stuff. And there is stuff being developed, but it's small. And yeah, I think it's an interesting time for VR. It's a really interesting time for VR. Do I think I'll succeed? God knows. I'll try. But yeah, I want to give this develop talk, put a lot more into it, think it out, structure it out. But it's an interesting problem space. And I know I'm nattering. I figure you're either here for it or you're not. That's chill. But yeah, I think some of the most meaningful developments in the VR space, because let's talk actual meaningful developments. I suppose we can't say the firing, but the demotion, the change in position for Herman at PlayStation is a big deal. That's a huge deal for PlayStation VR. A lot of people don't understand how PlayStation is structured with, Sony, PlayStation, and then like PlayStation Studios, and how platforming PlayStation Studios and first party influence things, and there's a lot of politics there. I shan't go into, but anyway, I'd say Herman's change is a really interesting one and an important one. I think Apple entering the market didn't do what people thought it would do, but it did what Apple does best, which is they started redefining what a XR operating system looks like, gave Meta a kick in the teeth as to like how to design an interface, and I think gave a lot of VR designers a kick in the teeth on how to design XR interfaces. So actually I think the software design that they brought to the space was the biggest wake-up call. And sort of the reinvigoration of the productivity space, I think, is really critical. Their hardware is arse. It's a big tech take on the Vario headset. Obviously, it's good because, spend enough money, you'll get something good. But I think bang for buck and how they developed it, I think there's some bad calls on that. Quest and Meta, they're killing it on the hardware side. They really are. Software side, not great, but they've been doing a lot of copying of Apple, which has really helped the space. The opening up of the store is huge. I haven't seen actual numbers or things I can reveal, but I'm confident in saying Meta store revenue's gone up significantly since the store rework, even though a lot of devs are complaining. So that's interesting, and I think that sort of sets a trend. And I think Steam Link's a big deal. You know, working at Adobe with people who aren't gamers, you know, like our audience was professional artists. They had no patience for like the bullshit of PC VR. Absolutely zero patience for it. Because if you want to play a game, it's fun times. You put up with a lot more because it's fun times. You are a working professional and you want to get shit done. You don't put up with shit. Like, you just want to get stuff done. And so, you know, the pain of technical setup in the PC VR space is so huge, and it doesn't need to be. You know, you look at the Rift S, great headset, you know, really nice and easy to use, relatively speaking. But I mean, even the Index is kind of great, but the problem is that the Index is a lot. I love my Index, but it's a lot. Yeah, the PC VR space is just jank. It's just jank. I'm going to call it what it is. And Steam Link, you know, Steam Link might not be as robust as remote desktop, virtual desktop, I forget names, VD, virtual desktop, yeah. But it just kind of works, and it's across Pico and it's across Meta headsets, and you know, it's good. It's good. And yeah, you know, that's a big deal. That stuff's happening there. And I think, you know, I've said before on this channel, our next game, we're going to focus on console VR first, mostly for internal reasons. But yeah, I think the market's changing. I think there's a big shift in the market coming. You know, now's the time, I think, to get into the market, but I think you need to get into it with eyes wide open. You know, that's the trick. You know, both eyes wide open. Other things, you know, obviously hardware components have come way down. Pancake lenses are still expensive, but I think they're worth it. I'll be interested to see how the Quest 3S numbers shake out, because obviously the big difference with the 3S is it doesn't have the pancake lenses. That cuts price, but I think we can all acknowledge the quality jump you get with pancake lenses, the comfort jump you get with pancake lenses. You know, I had this conversation yesterday when I was skating. I love my K2s, absolutely love my K2s. Strip the laces out of them, and they're an urban skate with a square heel, and I can just go pop in them, skate. They work great in the street, they work great in park. Really nice. They're heavy as fuck, but they're skates that get me to skate. I bought these really expensive FR carbon skates. Great skates. You know, form-fitted to the foot, really tight. They're a pain to get into. They're a pain to lace up, to do the bits. And they only feel really good after 5 minutes or so of skating. Like your first bit of skating, warming up in them is... Ugh. So when I had those skates, I didn't skate as much. And then I gave those skates away to a friend, and I went back to my K2s. And I bought new K2s, and I'm like, I fucking love my K2s. And that's how I feel about a lot of headsets. Like, I have the Beyond, barely used it. It's a great headset. I would only say good things about it. But getting into it and the experience of it, and it's just not a headset that I play VR in. And that's really bad. It's an expensive headset. I should sell it, but it's custom made to my head. Whereas the Quest 3, not 3S, 3, it's a headset I just put on, I work with. And I know it's not the best headset I have. Like, when I had the Quest Pro, because the Quest Pro had a charging dock, it was always ready to go. I use the Quest Pro a lot. And so, you know, it's about the headset that gets people to play, the headsets you get to use. And, you know, we all make bets. And I think the biggest problem in the VR industry is a lot of people making the bets are not eating the cake. You know, it's like we're saying what should go into the cake, but we're not eating it. And I think that is a critical problem. That's like the core problem. That and financing in VR is tricky. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. I think, you know, come on the walk. I'm going to go finish up the develop talk, get that submitted. Deadline is today. Well, technically tomorrow morning, but yeah, need to get that shit done. Yeah. Otherwise, get some work. Need to prep for Cyberpunk. And yeah, I'm glad I got a video done today that I can queue up after I've edited this, because last 2 mornings have been rough, and I don't think have been as good videos. So yeah, I know this is a long ramble. I know in cases times I've probably been a little bit out of breath because I've got the weighted vest on. Hopefully the audio is better. I'm hoping the audio comes out well. This is the audio we were using for the book podcast my wife was doing, and it sounds pretty good there, but obviously I'm using it in a really janky way at the moment, walking, huffing the wind. But yeah, anyway, again, you know, let me know what you think is useful. What are you curious about? You know, ask me questions. Okay, I'm gonna lock this up for now. Toodles.